So here's what I want to know. You are in residency. You see this skin regeneration tech, and you decide to sort of leave one of the best programs in the world. There are, there's so many people who would give a limb for that. Was there a single conversation or a moment where you thought, I'm doing this, or was it like more like a slow burn where you could not do it?
It was never anything I imagined doing with my career. I went into plastic surgery residency and went to Hopkins because I wanted to do academic research and be a surgeon. So that was the place doing some of the most exciting research in our field at the time, including face and hand transplant research was one of the big draws as to why I wanted to go there. And, ultimately this opportunity to launch Polarity Bio kind of came out of thin air. One of my co-residents had invented the technology to regenerate tissue, not just skin, but certainly he had done the most work in skin, which was obviously right in our wheelhouse as to what we were seeing every day, trying to reconstruct wounds. And he got thrown in the room with some venture capitalists. It was never his intention either. It was kind of a family connection. And he came back to Hopkins, told me all about it, and the light bulb kind of went off right then. He and I, as well as my current partner, who was also at Hopkins with us, who's still at the company with us, always intended to be doing research that would help patients, right? Like within our lifetime, we wanted to translate a discovery into a tangible product. And at that point, even though we were still just residents, we had been kind of in the game for years, going back to college, med school, etc. And those two guys both had PhDs. We had done a lot of academic research. It didn't really look like there was a real fast path to getting anything to actually affect patients in that world, but we didn't know anything about biotech industry and how to develop products on that side of the fence, and kind of got our eyes open to it rather quickly. And I think it was everything we had imagined growing up as the right path to do what we had always wanted to do. So it was a little bit less pivoting our careers and more realizing this is actually what we always wanted to do. This is the fastest way to get products to patients and to actually work on the research you want to be doing. A lot of times in academic research, grants chase prior results, and suddenly 10, 20 years later, someone's, the expert in a very narrow field that they never intended to be going down, but that's just where the grant money flowed, versus you bring it to a biotech to develop it on the industry side. Ultimately, you're raising money around the project you want to pursue. Obviously, that project needs to be a certain level of advanced, but you're not going to get tied down to things that aren't going anywhere. It's ultimately your guiding principle is to fail quickly and iterate and develop quickly. So kind of all the things I think we disliked about academic research were mitigated looking at this biotech path. But with all that said, even though the light bulb went off kind of immediately when the opportunity arose, it took us a couple of years to put the deal together, to find a deal that we were comfortable with, to leave residency and pursue. And, throughout those 2 years of pursuing the deal, there certainly was kind of that slow burn you're talking about of, if we find it, are we really doing this? And by the time the deal materialized, we were all in.
You spoke about grant money versus, investors and VC money. What, especially in terms of biotech, what gives you more wings for creativity, experimentation? Is there a difference, when you do it with grant money versus VC money?
Big difference is once you get your grant money, you got to pursue that project to the end and just exhaust everything you possibly can to make the project that was proposed work. Where, you could find out very early on, this isn't the path, we want to pursue something different. And you're kind of handcuffed by what you got the grant money for. So, in biotech, obviously you're pursuing the ultimate goal you've set, but how you get there, isn't going to be dictated by, what you predicted when you started the project. It's going to be dictated by what's working, what's not working, and how the field's evolving.
What's that one thing that you thought would be easy about running a biotech company that turned out to be an absolute nightmare? And also the flip side, what surprised you the most in the other direction?
Getting the right people. So that was much more challenging than I think I ever would have predicted. You can interview someone, they can have a great resume, they can have, seemingly the best experience, and they get in and it's not a right fit for whatever reason. The experience didn't quite line up with, you're in the startup biotech. Frankly, no one's really done what we've done before. And every day you find out that's more and more true. You can't just carbon copy an experience onto innovating something new. So sometimes the experience, if the people aren't willing to kind of get outside their comfort zone or the box that they've built for themselves, doesn't fit, or it's culture fit, or what have you, and really how to handle that. Do you hunker down and try to train and educate and, pull them towards the direction you need? Is it something where you need to move on quickly for both parties? And it's really become easier over time, not just with that experience, but the bigger network you build within your space, the more you can rely on people who have worked with other people that are going to be great. So I've found it easier over time because of the network that gets built, where if you have someone that's a rock star,
Yeah.
and they want to bring someone in they had worked with for 10 years in the past,
Yeah.
there's a little bit less question to that in my mind versus someone you've never met, no one's ever met, and you're really kind of making a bet on. Let's be honest, you can drag someone through 3 interviews, 4 interviews, but that's not going to tell you anything compared to when they get in the company. So that's still an ongoing challenge, and I think we all think about it a lot. But you got to balance that against you get so far along of needing help that you didn't bring in because of those reasons that it becomes challenging to train people because everyone's overloaded with work. So I think that remains the biggest challenge.